What's up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I'm Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me we have some more RPG horror stories. Speaking of, well, maybe not RPG horror stories, but D&D, what is your favorite third-party content book out there for you that you really like? I recently discovered the Humble Folk Tales, and I've been really loving it. But I want to ask you out there if you have your own specific, top favorite third-party content out there for D&D, or really any TTRPG. Let me know what kind of third-party things you like down in the comments below, and I'll get to my first RPG horror story for today. When I was left out for setting boundaries. So this is an old story, not all details will be 100% accurate, and it's pretty short. I was 15 or 16 at the time, I believe, when I had just started showing interest in and playing D&D. I don't even remember when the setting was, since I didn't even stay past the first session. There was no session 0, unfortunately. If there was, I'm sure I could have dodged the bullet even before the first session. What I vaguely remember about the setting was that it was some sort of Japanese anime setting, and I worked with the DM to create a character. For some context, this was a time in my life when I was still in therapy due to abuse I won't go into too much detail about, but it had to do with my father using drugs and being an alcoholic. So when I was making this character with the DM, I mentioned that fact and made my character strictly against alcohol. I was young at the time, so I probably didn't communicate well, but I did ask the DM if there would be a lot of mentions of alcohol. He said no, and asked that if there is any mention of alcohol that I could be left out of it. He said yes. I remember being so excited to play this character, had been nervous about joining D&D campaigns while in therapy since, well, a lot of campaigns involve alcohol. So the DM saying I didn't need to be involved helped me feel confident joining this one. And to my shock and horror, when the first session came, the DM started us out on a bar, with the other players having their characters drinking alcohol. After he described and asked what our characters would be doing, I said my character doesn't drink alcohol, so he'd be sitting nearby outside on a bench somewhere. Figured maybe the party would eventually leave the bar and meet my character. The DM then told me that I'll be in the bar. I said no, my character would not be in a bar of all places. Goes directly against my character. You know, alcoholic drinks aren't everything that you can drink at the tavern. Sometimes you just have water or tea. Tea, I think, is actually a very normal thing to have in a D&D medieval-ish setting. Maybe juices, I don't know. Could always just be like, alright, everybody's drinking alcohol, but our character here is drinking tea. Anyway, y'all at the tavern, and just kind of move on from there. I'm assuming the DM wants the party to be together, doesn't want to split apart, but I think because there's a miscommunication happening that if you're in a tavern, you have to drink alcohol, and basically the best solution probably would have been is that y'all are here enjoying your drinks and then move on from there. Not specifically mention alcohol, just everybody's enjoying some kind of a drink. Maybe some people are drinking ale, tea, water. Let's continue. So I suggested maybe the party could just talk to my character upon exiting due to needing an extra person on the team so that it wouldn't be an awkward situation. DM just said okay, and then I sat there and waited. And then the party left, and DM described them moving on from the scene. I tried to interrupt and ask them if they'd come talk to my character now, and I was told I should have been in the bar if I wanted that, or something to that effect. Anyway, I left there and ended up severely affecting my mental health for a while, to have been in such a sore and difficult spot in my life. How I was just a kid and how I was so excited to play the character I made only to be excluded due to a trigger I didn't want to be involved with. It stung a lot. I feel like this is one of those things that could have been a miscommunication adjusted and specifically fixed if there was more communication. Like, let's say, for example, the DM starts off with, y'all are starting off in a tavern, having all kinds of alcoholic drinks, ales, wines, whatever, and then play interrupts, hey DM, not my character. Can my character be drinking something else instead of, being outside? I feel like you'd still be at a tavern, just maybe not drink. Because when you tell your character is basically outside of the bar waiting, it sounds like you're kind of excluding your character out of it. I don't know, I feel like this is a huge miscommunication. When you said your character is not in the tavern drinking alcohol, they're waiting outside of it drinking nothing, I think the DM probably thought of, oh, your character doesn't want to be involved in this, and probably took offense to it instead of trying to read the room or trying to, remember the thing that talked. I don't know, listen, I'm gonna not blame the DM on this. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I was kind of messed up with them, be like, well, your character wasn't inside, so they didn't involve in it, and that's not a good way to approach it. But at the end of the day, I feel like it was a huge miscommunication in the situation. situation. I'm not gonna blame the DM, not gonna blame the player. I think a lot of it just comes to miscommunication. You stated that you get actors outside the tavern, not because of like trying to be away from the group or separate from the group, is because of the whole alcohol thing. But instead of DM remembering the, the conversation you guys had about alcohol, they kind of took offense to it, I suppose. Or maybe they're like, oh, fine, you want the character to be away, then fine, I'm not gonna force you to. I don't know. Or like, I don't know. There was a lot of miscommunication. The situation could have been handled better by both sides if you guys were to communicate out, about for it. Maybe DM asking, why do you want your character to be outside? Is there a reason you don't want to be inside? Overall, I think this is a miscommunication situation. But if you think there's something else going on, let me know down in the comments below. Maybe there's something I missed. But I'm moving on to the next story for today. Losing two friends over D&D. Hello, this is from a few years back, but while discussing a different D&D campaign, the story came back up and I decided to share it with it because a friend, listened to be mentioned Barbarian, said the story belonged here. Hopefully this isn't so long no one cares. This was in 2019 and I had been playing D&D with my IRL friends for about 6 years at this point. I will use our classes from the campaign to refer to everyone for simplicity. I was Ranger, my wife was Paladin, one friend was Barbarian, and one was a Cleric, and the last one was our DM. I've known Paladin, Cleric, and DM for over 15 years. Cleric and Paladin went to middle school and high school with me, and DM was Cleric's little brother, a grade behind us. Cleric was never quite as close to me and Paladin as Cleric, but the three of us hung out consistently over the years. We met Barbarian in college and started playing D&D, and it came up randomly. We all realized we'd been wanting to play for a while. We started with 3.5 and Barbarian was our original game master. We ran a successful campaign we all loved, and we got heavily into the hobby. Over the years, several of us were game masters, and we eventually switched over to Pathfinder. While Barbarian was running a Pathfinder game, DM came to us and pitched an idea for a campaign they wanted to run. He had a world where the church ran all aspects of life because an undead plague had destroyed the world and left only scattered strongholds throughout the world. Paladin, myself, and Barbarian decided to all be from the same place. Now at this point, our DM gave us freedom to create our characters and wanted to use Pathfinder. Found a class and subclass called Grave Warden, and really liked it as someone trained specifically to hunt the undead. Paladin decided to be an ASMR of a nature god who liked to hit things with hammers and be cute. Barbarian was a Dampier who was raised by the church to be a monster who hunts monsters and was ill-treated and kept in the basement. Think Quasimodo, gaslit into thinking he can't be around people type stuff. I decided to make my Ranger the son of a church leader who encouraged a friendship between Ranger and Barbarian so that if he ever became too monstrous, I could put him down. Of course, Barbarian was to think we were just friends so that we could have some planned inter-party conflict down the line. The three of us discussed this and created a small commander unit where we had been trained to do secret church missions. Cleric wanted to be from a distant land of orcs who was recruited to join us. Now, we were waiting for the current campaign to end, so we sat on this stuff for a bit, though the idea was run by the DM and approved. But as time went on, we had about 8 months till our current campaign was to end. DM decided to switch from Pathfinder to D&D 5e to try it. The three of us reworked our subclasses and ideas, and no harm was done, though I expressed disappointment in a 5th edition Ranger. I think most people would. The 5th edition Ranger when it first came out was lame. The new 5th edition Ranger out, I hear, is also pretty lame. I mean, from the things that I read, I'm not a fan of it, which is why I'm still sticking to 2014 edition of D&D with all of its supplements, including all the optional stuff from Tosh's, because Tosh's Ranger is better in my opinion. Anyway, let's continue. DM decided to work with me and sent me some Ranger UA stuff. I got hooked on the idea of being a Gloomstalker, and DM went about the idea and approved it. Gloomstalkers became a church organization that the Ranger's father ran. Ranger was assigned to work with Paladin and Barbarian because they were two prized assets of the church, a literal demigod and the strongest fighter, and be the leader of the small group. As the campaign drew very close, the DM brought something to help us finalize our characters or ideas one night, an enormous 3-ring binder full of lore. We skimmed it, but didn't find anything that contradicted our ideas. It was around that time two things happened. I, the Ranger, came out as trans, male to female, and DM started to imply that he was unhappy with our group dynamic. The three of us all independently got messages where the DM sent us finalized backstories where he had rewritten our dynamic and stories. He removed Paladin from being a close friend of us other two, killed Ranger's mother for added trauma, and made Ranger's father a distant, cold presence. he did almost nothing to Barbarian. He also had a lot of trouble with my new name and pronouns. I didn't know if the two were related, but the timeline made me suspicious. I am curious on why the DM is just suddenly, I don't know where, like rewriting character backstories. If they're approved already, but then there's like a whole 3-prong binder PDF full of lore, maybe something collided within it. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's a lot of miscommunication when it comes to like putting together the character, or maybe just, I don't know, like a spark of like DM going, ooh, but this would be way better, and just started, you know, rewriting backstories without checking with people. I'm hoping they check with people, but it sounds like maybe they didn't, and players are just kind of sticking with it. If you have a DM that's just rewriting a backstory, unless they can like validate why they're rewriting it and explain you like why this would be work a little better within the world, I feel like it's a little bit strange to just start rewriting huge chunks of the player's backstory. Some minor things like maybe town of origin or whatever, or like name of a character, I think is not a problem. But if it's like rewriting like character dynamic and stuff, is just strange. Maybe the DM has one idea what the dynamic is supposed to be like, and players have a different one. I don't know, but let's continue. Despite this, we started the game. DM created a Discord for us to post schedules and talk about stuff, though we played in person. Another thing to mention is that for years we played D&D at Paladin and Rangers, my self-apartment, and typically played 3 to 4 hours with Barbarian, driving from another city to join us. When we switched to DM's campaign, he requested we play at his house. No problem at all. He lived down the street like 2 lights. When the game finally started, Barbarian, Paladin, and myself all noticed very quickly a sense of frustration with us. DM seemed very mad that we had built characters who functioned well within his world. He didn't say anything though, so we just powered through and had fun. The other immediate problem was that within about an hour and a half of us playing on our typical game night, DM and Cleric's mother got home from work. The game ended no matter where we were or how long the session could go on. I respected the mother and we all would go home. Due to the travel time for Barbarian and Paladin typically rushing over straight from work, a growing sense of frustration began to set in through. It sucked to have our games go for hours and hours to barely over an hour. It was at this point, about 4 sessions in, the DM confronted me about my ranger and said they had to heavily nerf the Gloomstalker. I was frustrated because we had sent me the subclass and approved it previously, but despite some debate, I agreed to lose the invisibility portion, despite that being the key reason I wanted to play the subclass. Really? That's a problem? I mean, at the end of the day, like, I get it, right? The whole thing with Gloomstalker, if they're only perceived by dark vision, they basically become practically invisible, unless you use a torch, or a candle, or light spell, or dancing light, or fairy fire. Like, there's really easy ways to deal with your Gloomstalker Ranger's invisibility as a DM. Light. It's a simple solution. Have an enemy light a torch, or have an enemy use the light cantrip. You know, stuff like that. It's not that difficult. As long as there's light illumination, then the Gloomstalker's invisibility when it comes to just using straight up dark vision is just gone. And at the same time, that only works if you're in complete darkness and creatures specifically can only perceive you through dark vision. So like in caverns or places that are extremely dark or like dimly lit and stuff. Like even with Unearthed Arcana, I know on some of the Unearthed Arcana stuff can be a little bit unbalanced because like playtest material and everything, but even then, like even today's Gloomstalker Ranger, all you gotta do to defeat their dark vision invisibility is light a torch. Any sort of light source will literally work. Just give one of your enemies a torch and maybe throw it on the ground or something. Anyway, weird things going on, but there's still more friction that I'm noticing from Cleric. Maybe something else is going on behind the scenes for Cleric, and it's like a compounding like frustration that sort of builds and builds and builds and builds and finally gonna erupt like a volcano. That's what I'm anticipating. Let's continue. The next session we were discussing armor our characters were wearing, and Paladin described her bikini armor. Hell yeah. This had been something in the original backstory and reiterates it many times, but this time the DM just said, "You can't have that, it's unrealistic." Paladin was miffed and showed a section of the rules that basically say you can choose your armor aesthetic, but he was adamant. A promise they could get magic bikini armor later. Wow, what a solution. When the chance came a session later, they were told it would be 10,000 gold, but yet to get any gold, and when directly asked, the DM said it would take months, if not years, to get that much money. The armor would still be basic armor. I don't know if maybe it's like unrealistic fantasy stuff, but if one of my players asked, hey, can my character be wearing bikini armor? I would say sure, if you want to. Obviously, I don't want to turn my games into like some sort of like a D&D hentai game, but if a player wanted to wear bikini armor, go for it. Do whatever you want. I don't mind it, because flavor is flavor. Aesthetics is free. But at the end of the day, as long as it doesn't affect it mechanically, then I don't care. I don't mind. Maybe it's because I don't mind bikini armor. Maybe I think it looks kind of good, honestly, on some characters. Barbarian and Cleric receive no such attacks on their characters, and in fact, were given opportunities to highlight things in their backstory. It began to feel like he disliked Paladin and myself. DM was also the only one still struggling with my new name and pronouns, like getting very pissy about my or others' corrections. There were a few other moments of frustration, such as being given a magical bow despite building my character as Belmont-esque from the very beginning, wanted to use a whip for combat, and saying I didn't want to just turn into a typical ranger equals bow, or getting mad when we defeated a boss he didn't want us to beat, and immediately knocking us all out anyway so we could play out the cutscene we had intended. Okay, now these are actual legitimate problems. Knocking people out just because they defeat your BBG boss or whatever, it's kind of a dick move. Let them have the win, let them have the victory. I understand if you don't want one of your enemies or BBGs to like die off immediately, but make that part of a story. You could totally turn into a big moment of the story where they defeat somebody, but that means now that, like, I don't know, the general is defeated, now the high general can come into the story, somebody that's even more powerful, somebody is even better, that learned about the defeat of the bad guy. Now the even bigger bad guy knows about it and is going to be, you know, entering into the story. Make it part of a story, make it part of the narrative. Like, it feels like you're punishing your players for doing what they're supposed to do. If there's a bad guy they're supposed to defeat, if there's a boss that's supposed to fight and defeat, then they just want to fight and defeat the boss. How are they supposed to know it's supposed to be some like a cutscene basically where the boss doesn't die or runs away or whatever? All the players want to do is do the thing the character's doing, fighting monsters, fighting bad guys, winning loot and stuff like that. Speaking of loot, by the way, if you're giving your players something they generally don't even want, or something that's not even part of the build, you don't have to be so hell-bent on having them keep it. I think the most important part, in fact, I think my favorite part about giving out loot is giving out specific loot that players would really actually want to have rather than not have. If you ever play that is focusing specifically on whips and wants to just build with whips and use whips, what kind of item would you want to give them as a weapon that could actually enhance their build? Not a bow. You don't give them a ranged weapon just because ranger equals bow, haha. If they're using a whip, if anything, you may want to give them a better whip or some sort of, I don't know, material they can use to make a better whip, or give somebody else some weapon master to create an even more powerful whip, stuff like that. You don't just completely change characters' builds with a surprise magic item. Somebody likes to use great swords. They're gonna appreciate a maul or a great axe, but they'll probably prefer to have a great sword. Or somebody likes to use two short swords, right? They're probably not gonna complain too much about a scimitar because it does basically a similar thing, but maybe the build of the character be about piercing damage, so maybe they care about having a short sword instead of a scimitar. Understanding what your players are building and start giving them magical items that build towards that is very, very important, and you should probably be doing that for your players to make sure they can have specific like builds that they're working towards be rewarded, not be completely obfuscated or thrown for the mix. You don't give a barbarian a firearm musket they can't even barely use because they're built for strength instead of dexterity. That doesn't make sense at all. You don't give a wizard a great sword, just like you don't give a fighter a staff that increases their spellcasting modifier. It's a very dumb way to reward your players by giving them something they will never use, giving them useless magical items. Give them something they can use, give them something they can benefit from, give them something that's a reward, they can use some sort of a boon. Maybe a fighter doesn't have a lot of spellcasting, so you can give him a wand of magic missiles, or a wand of detect magic, or I don't know, a limited staff of fireballs that has only 2 fireballs before it breaks or something. I don't know. You can always give some sort of a smart magic items to the players that can benefit them, but don't give them something that's going to be useless or something they can't even use or is complete lack of benefit for them. I know I'm getting a little bit heated, maybe I'm rambling too much about this, but I feel like this is a problem with this DM. They have this friction going on, and maybe I think it's like a volcano. It's about to burst in this next paragraph, because this next paragraph, it's chunky. Let's get to it. The final straw came when, driving home from another session, this one actually particularly long. This session had involved Barbarian quite heavily. We found a young boy under a curse to become a monstrosity, strong demon, unless he drank a suppressing potion every day. Not knowing what the potion did after finding the boy among the wreckage of the caravan, we withheld it, only to realize the boy had been the one to destroy his caravan himself. The boy had no memory of being a demon. I, as the member who respected the church organization, suggested we give the boy to local church to raise and deal with this issue. Barbarian saw the boy would be another version of himself. After trying to help the boy and realizing he was too dangerous, we had a very emotional scene where Barbarian took the boy from the woods and had him think about his happiest memories when he wanted to do with his life. Then he beheaded him to save him from being tortured and gaslit into being another church monster. Then the DM immediately had the boy revive and inform us that he could not die. Barbarian felt cheated out of his emotional moment, but we felt the session fairly undone, and then Mother arrived home and we had to leave. On the way home, Paladin, Barbarian, and myself discussed how much better the longer session felt and how the immediate undercut was so disappointing. Barbarian did say if it was revealed later, even the very next session, it wouldn't have felt so bad, but the way it was done felt like you didn't make the decision I wanted and upset him. Wow. Okay, I know some people are gonna feel a little bit different about what happened because clearly it's, I guess, violence on a child and everything, but narratively, grim, very grim, but also I feel like sort of robbed the player from actions of consequences kind of thing. I don't know, it felt like, oh, you didn't do the thing that I wanted you to do, so there we go, so therefore we gotta undo the action you did just because the boys just of course survived because you didn't do the thing that I wanted to do. You know, if I was put in a similar situation, I'll probably feel like the moment would have robbed the player from their specific character moment. Like this was the moment where, I mean, I understand everybody's gonna have the limits. Some people don't want any kind of like kid violence or anything. But in this game, from the way it's described, with the world being destroyed and the church is the only thing that's like helping fight back the monsters, I feel like it's already setting a very grim, dark setting. And for the DM to take away this player choice, because if it was something like just murder hobing, I'll be like, yeah, it's murder hobing. You should probably stop that. But this at least feels narratively like a canon moment, or at least an important moment where players can make a decision, and the decision is being made by a player strictly affected by this whole like curse of the monster and stuff, and it's just being taken away completely because the DM said, oh, this was the wrong decision you made. You chose column A instead of column B, so therefore the decision is undone. I feel like that kind of cheapens the whole thing. It would be probably better if, let's say, for example, the boy came back later and it was found out that it was resurrected by some sort of great entity or something. I don't know. Maybe the boy made a warlock pact or something, and the patron basically resurrected him or something for like a different divine reason. Maybe the boy makes a cameo later on, you know, something like that. Some sort of more tactful way to present the character if the DM didn't want the character eliminated immediately, you know? Either way, like, I'm starting to see there's a big friction, and I think the biggest friction is the DM clearly has plan A for the world, but the players are doing plan B because they don't know that there's a hidden script they're supposed to follow, because there is a hidden script. DM is wanting the players to follow a specific script and is rewarding them with stuff even though it doesn't fit their build. The DM has specific idea for what the character is supposed to be like and what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to respond, but the players respond in a different way that doesn't match how the DM is thinking they're going to respond, and therefore getting frustrated at them and making the whole game just feel frustrating. That's at least what I'm getting. Maybe I'm missing something. Let me know down in the comments below. I've always been the outspoken one, so they both asked me to message DM and the three of us and see if we could move back to mine and Paladin's apartment so we could play, and express some frustrations with the way we felt limited in our choices and backstory. I emphasized that I respect Cleric and DM wanted to empty the house so the mother could relax and work, but that the three of us also worked hard and wanted to enjoy our longer sessions, and that despite complaints we did enjoy the game. I messaged DM when we got home and his response was, did you even want to play D&D anymore? I answered that I did, that despite some issues, I love playing games with him, and that the intent was for more D&D, with longer and more intricate sessions. I got no further response. Next day, Paladin, Cleric, myself, and another friend were getting together for our weekly movie night. DM had never expressed interest in this event. When Barbarian arrived, he seemed agitated. Upon asking, we learned that apparently DM had reached out to Barbarian. DM asked if Barbarian wanted to keep playing D&D without Paladin and myself because he was a good player. Apparently that had happened quite early in the morning, while movie night was around 6 p.m. And Barbarian had told DM they needed to message me and Paladin and that they found this question shady. Barbarian got no response, and I messaged DM immediately to ask what the F. Cleric never arrived for movie night that evening. DM never answered me again through direct messages, but after receiving messages both from myself and Paladin, who was very angry at going behind us to try to ditch us from the game, DM posted the game was over and deleted the Discord. Now, of course, this was a friend of ours for years, and Cleric is one of my absolute ride or die best friends, and Paladins. So we called a few times, both of them to no avail, and even tried to go over to talk to them. No answer. Next time we saw Cleric was over retrieving some stuff we had borrowed, some board games and DVD, and telling us he needed space and we could talk later. Informed a mutual friend he no longer planned to talk to us. DM, as well, never answered again. To this day, we can't say exactly who the problem was. We had frustrations, but also engaged with his lore. We were having a ton of fun. So much so that a new friend of mine recently took the dregs of this idea and let me, Barbarian and Paladin, run these characters again so we could have proper game to play. Losing two close friends, one of them being one of my absolute favorite people in the world, almost killed the hobby for me. If it wasn't for Reddit and finding new people to fill out the group as we moved online for the pandemic, I can't say I'd still be playing. Anyway, that's how I lose friends over D&D. It's really strange how Cleric got involved in this whole situation, because like the thing about it I felt like was the DM was like the problem. Maybe the cleric? Both were really the problem. Honestly, I gotta be honest. I thought the cleric and the DM were literally the same person for a little bit here. But now that I think about it, yeah, no, they're definitely different people. Either way, I feel like there's a lot of friction with the DM and with cleric. I don't know if cleric necessarily was the biggest result for the friction. Maybe they were. I'm not fully sure. I have to reread the story. But the DM definitely had some problems with like the rewriting of the story, rewriting all backstories, rewriting how characters are supposed to act, completely invalidating player action, giving rewards that don't really match the character build. Like, come on, like if a character is using weapon A, you don't start giving a weapon B that doesn't even like play important role in their build. Only give stuff that matters for them, because if you just start giving your wizard mauls and great axes and great swords, great, now they have great, now they have weapons they can't even use, because I mean, unless they like, I don't know, pick up some sort of proficiency, but either way, they can't use this stuff. They're casting spells unless the specific weapon is designed for them to help them with casting more spells or doing something they can't do themselves. Then it doesn't make sense to give them a +1 great sword or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. I just don't see why. Either way, I feel like there's a lot of friction that's going on where the DM thinks the campaign is going to go like this, but the players are taking on like this instead. And maybe the DM want to have specific type of world that your characters really didn't fit, because it just, I don't know, felt really weird. There's some sort of animosity building from wherever it could be. Could it be something with the fact that they couldn't get used to your pronouns? Maybe. I don't know 100%. It's still really strange the fact that there was just so much friction, so much unnecessary friction, like a volcano about to erupt as the pressure just builds and builds and builds instead of being addressed. I feel like there was a lot of pressure going on behind the scenes that DM just never spoke about. And having this session menu be changed to something else, I feel like maybe DM and cleric basically got into this friction, or maybe it turned into like DM and cleric versus the rest of the party for whatever reason. There's definitely a lot of friction going on that was never addressed, and because of this, the things kind of imploded. I don't think it's anybody else's fault specifically. I mean, actually no, I will say this. I feel like if there was some sort of friction going on with DM and cleric and the rest of the party, that should have been addressed immediately by cleric and DM, because clearly they had problems with everybody else, but nobody else seems to have problems with like the DM and cleric. I mean, yeah, there were some problems for sure, but I don't think it was enough to be like complete game changer to the point where you have to just destroy the entire friend group, right? If I missed anything important out, please let me know now in the comment section below. Yeah, I feel like it's everything I can really learn from this or glean from this. There might have been some details I missed out, so if you could let me know, I'd appreciate it greatly. And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales tomorrow. Bye-bye.